So I want to show you Vivek Ramaswamy, somebody that I think is absolutely brilliant, discuss the evolution of the ESG movement, where it came from, and describing it as a 1776 issue. And we're going to come back and discuss it. It's a 5-minute clip. Stick with it all the way through. It's really interesting.
So for somebody that doesn't know, can you break down how ESG was sold, meaning why did some people think this was a good idea, and why do you think it's not a good idea?
So the origin story of the modern version of it starts with the 2008 financial crisis. Okay, what happened in the 2008 crisis? Actually, there's two things that happened in 2008 that were really interesting in the back of the 2008 financial crisis. One was a mistake made by the Republican Party, which was to bail out the big banks. That was, I remind you, Hank Paulson, an alumnus of Goldman Sachs, who used taxpayer money to bail out Goldman Sachs under President Bush. That happened. And what happened in response to that was you had a left-wing backlash. By the way, I think that was crony capitalism all the way down. I was a critic of it at the time. I remain a critic of it today. There was a left-wing backlash that said, you know what, if that's the way you're going to behave, then we, Occupy Wall Street, want to take money from all of those wealthy corporate fat cats and bankers and redistribute it to poor people to help poor people. Mm-hmm. Agree or not, that is what they had to say. It was a coherent response, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right around that time, a second trend was happening in sort of the political, socio-political life of our country. Barack Obama was elected as president of the United States. There was the birth of a new strand of the left. So not the Occupy Wall Street left, but a new strand of the left that said, you know what? It's not quite economic injustice or poverty that we care about. Not just that. There's the real problem that has to do with racism and misogyny and bigotry and climate change. That's become a big one.
The biggest
now.
one.
Yes, the biggest one of all, right? I mean, I think wokeism is one religion. Climatism is a religion that dwarfs wokeism by comparison. But anyway, they said this is the sort of the new theory of the case. And what happened was that this was the opportunity of a generation for big business in this country, for Wall Street in particular. Because if you're Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, it's a pretty tough pill to swallow, bitter medicine, okay?
Right.
The new woke stuff is pretty easy. You applaud diversity and inclusion, put some token minorities on your executive ranks or your boards or whatever, muse about the racially disparate impact of climate change after you fly on that private jet in Davos. It's good work if you can get it, but they didn't do it for free. And that's what this whole ESG stakeholder capitalism thing is about. They made a new demand to the new left that says you look the other way when it comes to leaving our corporate power intact. And so it's this sort of arranged marriage, actually. My parents are from India. They had an arranged marriage. That was the good kind.
You're like, I know it all too familiar. I get it.
I mean, I didn't mean to like use that term in a negative sense. They had a good kind of arranged marriage, but this is not an arranged marriage of love. Okay, this is mutual prostitution. Each side gets something out of the trade, and the net result of that, the bastard child, was the birth of this ESG movement, the ESG industrial complex, this apologist model of capitalism that says you have to advance these progressive agendas as a way of atoning for your sin in the 2008 financial crisis, but even more as a way of, if you can't beat them, buy them. And that's effectively the mutual codependent relationship between a progressive movement that used to hate big business, but instead got in bed with them. And together, big banks, woke millennials get in bed, they birth woke capitalism, and they use that to sacrifice Occupy Wall Street, which they put up for adoption. So anyway, that's a little bit of the history of this game. Why am I upset about it? Yes, Milton Friedman correctly said that this would make businesses less efficient and they would be less good at making widgets, and then that shrinks the size of the economic pie, and we're all worse off. And we all know that old school conservative, classical conservative, neolibertarian argument. I actually agree with most of it, by the way. But that's not what gets me going on this issue, okay? My concern was not that politics would infect capitalism, not just that, but that capitalism would infect democracy. Because what this worldview says is that the way you settle questions like climate change or systemic racism or whatever it might be is not the way we do it here in America, which is through free speech and open debate in the public square where every person's voice and vote counts equally. That was the bargain we struck in 1776. For better or worse, that's how we do it over here. But that we got to go back to doing it the way they used to do in the old world. Back in old world aristocratic Europe, where a small group of business elites and labor elites and church elites got together behind closed doors and decided what was right for the rest of society at large. And that's why I sort of try to educate people. This is not a Republican versus Democrat 2022 or 2023 issue. This is a 1776 issue, and it's a question of how you settle disagreements in a society. Is it as citizens with an equal voice through a democratic process, or is it through some type of aristocratic monarchical structure where some guy named Larry Fink sitting on Park Avenue gets to use your money to tell you what kind of society he will create, even if it's one you didn't vote for?
So again, the framing of this issue is the idea that the old elites of Europe used to get together and decide for everyone else what would transpire, whether the serfs would be going to war, what would happen to the kingdom. And in America, that was largely done away with. In 1776, it was one person, one vote. Today, that power is once again being centralized, and you're seeing that in Davos right now, where they are trying to make decisions as to how you drive your car, how often, the area that you're allowed to go to, how you must eat, whether or not you can even use a gas frickin' stove. And the ESG movement is largely a bribe that is being offered to China. They are sacrificing, Larry Fink of BlackRock is sacrificing America, for example, by getting the oil industries in America to drop oil projects so that their ESG score will be high. I'll tell you in a moment how he's able to do that. And guess where that project ends up? In PetroChina's hands. So the asset moves over to China because Larry Fink interferes. What does Larry Fink get from this deal? BlackRock gets to offer the first mutual funds, foreign offered mutual funds in China. That is his reward. So he's leveraging the good of American citizens for himself. Now, how is he able to do that? It's because you out there, you have money that is passively being invested in index funds. But who has the vote? You have appointed Larry Fink and other Vanguard, State Street, all these other huge mutual fund companies to vote for you. And as Vivek describes, it is a mutual prostitution between the woke left and Wall Street, where we will give you a few minority representation on boards, women this, women that, environmental this. We will go woke and help you achieve your agenda. You just leave us alone. And now they are voting with your money. So you are unwittingly supporting this. And once again, it comes down to the centralization of power in the hands of the Larry Finks of the world, the Davos group, where they are deciding what is best for us. The same way that they decided that lockdowns were best for us and destroyed everyone who tried to stand in their way, who offered a different alternative. That's what YouTube did. That's what big tech did. The power is once again being centralized rather than decentralized. And that makes for a very tenuous and brittle society, because you don't have to be wrong that often. It can only be once, and the whole system comes crashing down when you have centralized the power, as opposed to when you're running different experiments in different jurisdictions, which is one of the great things about the United States. Because of federalism, you have different laws in Florida as opposed to California, and you see how those respective societies are doing. Meanwhile, they want us to import the values of California into the entire nation. So again, it's a 1776 issue versus the elite centralization of power. And that is what ESG is. And I hope that I gave you something here. If I did, thumb up the video and share it, and leave a comment with your thoughts on the subject.